Hi, my name is Adam Mostogle. I'm the founder and inspirer of Illuminate Education. I'm really excited to be welcoming you to the Business Studies Challenge for 2018. Along with a number of other schools across northern Tasmania, you'll be completing this challenge to allow you to authentically apply the skills that you're learning right now in your classes to our small business context here in Tasmania. So you'll be taking a real problem that we need solved in our economy, adapting it, learning how to create a brand new idea, how to test it, how to validate it, and you'll be pitching to investors at the end of this very, very brief challenge. So in that, there's a couple of components. You'll be doing a couple of lessons in class where I'll be presenting, as well as some guest speakers as well, about some of the aspects that are critical to this challenge. You'll get a chance to work through those elements and take the time that you need to prepare for our August 8 workshop, where everybody participating in this program from across northern Tasmania will come together and they will show how good they are at business. They'll rapidly prototype their idea, rapidly test it, handle a few challenges, and as I said, pitch for investment to get those ideas up and running. And you never know, you might end up with a job out of it as well. So in this, what we're going to be asking you to do is to come up with a brand new idea that's going to be a brand new business that we need in our region. But there's going to be a little bit of focus to it. We call it our core challenge, and this is something that we want you to refine and focus your idea around. So you've got handouts in front of you. I'm sure that you've had a look over them, and that core challenge on the front gives you quite a detailed outline of what we're asking you to focus on with your idea, and your idea has to fit to this framework. I'm just going to run through, I guess, what the business component actually is. So your business concept that you're going to develop for this challenge is to educate people about and or celebrate the Tasmanian brand, which can be done in a new design, product, service, or experience. We're going to be pretty broad with that. You can create any style of business that you want. Don't just think Tasmanian brand equals tourism. You can do so many more things with our great brand that we have in this state. As long as you are being relevant to that brand, you can come up with any style of business that you think is effective and is needed in the market. Now, this idea should authentically reflect the brand of Tasmania. So you might have to justify, what do you think that brand is and how do you reflect that? And that's to be a focus on a new and innovative way to do this that is not being met in the market. I don't want you to just copy or slightly adapt something. I'm really keen for brand new, revolutionary ideas, the creative stuff. I know that you have them. There are grey-haired business people out there that are looking to just recreate the wheel or potentially copy an idea from somewhere else. And I know that you've got skills and innovative ideas that are beyond that, and I'm really keen for you to celebrate them through this challenge. Now, there is only one other restriction. And that is that teams should limit the amount of capital investment for their new idea when they start working out the numbers and working out how feasible it is. You're capped at each team member contributing a maximum of $5,000 each. Now, I'm not saying that you are going to contribute $5,000. Don't worry about checking your bank balance. But it's the idea that if you've got 4 team members, your maximum amount of investment that you can ask for and you can play with in your idea is $20,000. Obviously, if you've got 5 people, it's 25. If you've got 6 people, it's 30,000. It's not a lot of money. Really keen for you to think small, refine down your idea. There's a small business term called bootstrapping to really try and work with the minimum viable product to get your idea up and running. And that's what we want to encourage you to have a look at, because you might be surprised how quickly you can pull your idea down into something, a single product that you get off the line that then builds momentum and you can build the business from that. So that's the core challenge that you'll be focused on. You'll be coming up with an idea that meets that. But in this workshop, you're going to hear about the Tasmanian brand. I've got Rick Martin, brand architect for Effective Naturally, knows the tourism brand really, really well. He's going to share about brand values, what a brand actually is, and give you some tips and insights on how a brand actually works, some of the things you might not be aware of. It's not only going to be relevant for this challenge. I'm sure anything you do in business, you'll get a lot of stuff out of that workshop. And then I'm going to come back. I'm going to run through some idea generation exercises. There's a couple of stages to it, so you might not get it all done straight away, but I'm going to intro it all so you can get a good understanding of what we're looking at you doing in this first stage of this exercise, and then you get a chance to actually start doing it. And that's what this is all about, you actually making things happen, actually experiencing it. So much of the learning that you're going to get out of this program is by you listening to these great people and applying it straight away. And so with that said, I'm going to hand straight over to Rick Martin.
Hi everyone, my name is Rick Martin and I'm a brand strategist. My company is called Effective Naturally. Now, the idea behind that name is actually around the power of brand. So brand gives you the opportunity to create momentum around an organization. There are a few misconceptions around brand, and that is that it's just a name you put on something or the colors or whatever that may be. But really, a brand is is really not what you say it is, but it's what the consumer says it is. And this is why consistency is so important. So a brand isn't just a name you put on something, but it's actually a set of values and attributes that rolls through every single part of what your organisation does. And through having that consistency, you start to build trust. And in this day and age, trust is a very valuable currency to be able to ensure you're chosen over your competitor. So being able to pay attention to your brand, utilising it well, staying consistent and true, making it genuine, and understanding who your audience is are all parts of a brand formula that will help give you a competitive edge over your competitors. Now, as an example, one of my roles previously is that I was a Director of Tourism Northern Tasmania. Now, that's a body that sits under Tourism Tasmania, which is really around Tourism Tasmania has a role of where they advertise and promote the state as a whole, whereas each of the regional tourism organisations then have a requirement to be able to develop the product and find their own niche within that area. Now, one of the things that we did when we were developing the brand attributes, because I guess Northern Tasmania, it has a brand because other people are saying what they think it is, but it wasn't consistent. So really the value of a brand is when people are saying the things about you that you want them to be saying. So that takes time because you need to communicate who you feel you are, and you also need to infuse that into all the interactions and the touch points they have with you so that they start to feel that that is who you are. So from a point of Northern Tasmania, we actually went for two things. We leveraged off Tourism Tasmania's branding, and we also went with the parts of their branding that we felt particularly fit our region. So in other words, we weren't trying to manufacture a pretend position, we were actually understanding what our part was in that area. And the good thing about doing that is that we were able to leverage off their advertising spend. So we're a much smaller organisation. They advertise for tourism right across the country and in some international markets. And as a smaller organisation, you couldn't afford to do that. So what it meant is that every time they spoke, they could have been speaking for us. And it just means that they heighten the awareness of people wanting to travel to Tasmania. And we made sure that we heightened the focus and the desire for people to include Northern Tasmania within that trip. So the attributes, some of the attributes that Tourism Tasmania have were things like being bigger on the inside, brutal beauty, and understanding specifics around contradiction. So, you know, sometimes we're a little bit quirky and seductive at the same time. So we looked at what we could do for Northern Tasmania, which was to be genuine and authentic. And we noticed a few things. First of all, even different to Hobart, is that we are even more boutique than Hobart is. So boutique in comparison, Hobart in comparison to Sydney is quite boutique. But when you come to Northern Tasmania, things get even smaller again. So you think of that, what does that mean for conference centres, for example? Well, conference centres, in a lot of the bigger centres, they are big, white, concrete auditoriums. They're massive, hold 800 to 1,000 people at a time, often quite impersonal. You know, Hobart has a lot of conference centres. They are a little warmer than some of the ones you might see in the bigger cities. But when you look at Northern Tasmania, we actually need to do a combination of venues because we don't have anything that large. And they're all warmer, you get closer to the people. Even our footy stadium, you get a bit closer to the game because everything is more boutique. So that's why we chose boutique within that and really decided that if that's one of the attributes we'll take, we're actually are looking at all the things in our region that match up to that. And all the things that come with a boutique experience. So we don't try to be big, white, loud and shiny. We stick with that boutique aspect. The other one is eclectic. So eclectic is a bit of a collection of lots of smaller things, and rather than come to Northern Tasmania for just one big thing, you actually come for a range of little combinations in there. So that again is something that's authentic around our region. Then we have playful. And if you think about events such as Junction, for example, Festivali, now playful as an attribute means a lot of different things to different people. People play in all different types of ways. But what we didn't want to be is serious. So we don't want to be cheesy, we don't want to be corny, and we don't want to be immature. But we still want to have the opportunity to have a bit of a play and stay lighthearted. So if you think about events like Junction or Festivali and now Monofoma, all of those really fit into that brand. And the other good thing about that is that we were able to build some trust around what our product is because the brand of Tasmania was already established. And we were new, we had to start sort of fresh. And if we had gone and tried to do something completely different, we would have had to build that from scratch. And we would have had to advertise and get all those dollars through, and it's just not possible. So that was why we made that strategic decision. But there's one other attribute that we mention, and it's called Quietly Proud. Now, Tourism Tasmania has a focus on an audience called the lifelong learners, and they're about to do some refreshing and tweaking with their branding as a state. But that brand, everything that they've done so far speaks to lifelong learners, and usually they are couples between the ages of 30 to 45, but they are people that they don't have children. So in regards to lifelong learners, what people may have not noticed now until I say it is that in all of the ads for tourism in Tasmania, you don't see children. That's because they're not the target market. Families are not the target market. They're going to the Gold Coast, a whole range of other places. So when we think about the Quietly Proud attribute, it's actually speaking to the lifelong learners. And what it's saying is that when you get here, you're not going to have us yelling messages at you because that's not what a boutique brand does. But we do invite you to scratch beneath the surface. You know, when you go to a vineyard, ask them the questions because they're happy to share. They're very proud of their product. They're just not going to yell it at you. We're not going to be massive self-promoters. And that makes it a little bit more intriguing, a little bit more fun and playful, and it's worked really well for us. So they're our brand attributes that fit within Tasmania. So that's boutique, eclectic, playful, and quietly proud. And if you were to look after those attributes in any organisation that you built to be part of the tourism industry in Tasmania, it would do quite well within that because that also speaks to the Tourism Tasmania branding. Now, they are about to go through some change around that, and I think they're calling it Brand 2.0. And essentially, that is that they are tweaking the way they communicate it, but they won't necessarily throw the attributes out. So you're not going to go in there and all of a sudden say, oh, actually, we've changed into a completely different type of product. The product stays pretty much the same, but they're going to shift the way they communicate it in some ways. And doing that without actually damaging what you've said you stand for all these past years is actually quite an art. You've got to be very careful around that. But yeah, that gives you a bit of a look at, I guess, what the Tourism Tasmania branding is and how we have developed the Northern Tasmania branding to be part of that as a strategic idea. In regards to children, for example, now if you were going to create your own brand and you say, well, this is all about the kids. Okay, well, there's a few tourism products that are particularly around kids. So you might think things like Penny Royal or Tasmania. You know, there are a couple of areas that really love having kids as part of that experience. It's much harder for them to be able to find their place in a brand that's much bigger for them because if no one else is attracting children and Tasmania as a whole isn't trying to speak to families, then that means they have to try and encourage children from other parts of the country in by themselves. And you have a smaller value proposition for someone to want to fly to Tasmania with their whole family thinking, exactly what are all the things we're going to be able to go do? So that's the reason I mention that is because this is why understanding who your audience is critical to being able to understand the brand that you want to deliver. And when you understand what's important to the consumer, you can make sure the values that you've adopted are ones that they are going to connect with as well on a personal level. Yeah, sure, and that's really fair. It comes back a little bit to those other products we've mentioned about with children, for example. If part of the target audience doesn't fit the same, but if the brand attributes don't fit, well, it just means it's going to be a tougher road. So you have less opportunity to be, teamwork is helpful. So I'm a real advocate that if you're going to have a retail store, and I wouldn't be putting it, people would go, I'm going to put that in the food strip so that it's the only one. Be like, no. Put your retail with all the other retailers, because people go where there's a whole critical mass of that. So if you're going to do something that's completely different to everyone else, it's going to want to be good. It's going to want to be able to stand alone, and it has to be able to bring people in on its own merits, and not just bring people in from, Launceston, for example. Your business case might require that you need a certain amount of customers every year. And if you can't get that same amount locally, you need to think about how you're actually going to get them to jump on a plane and fly here for it. That's where it can be a bit trickier, but what you need to remember is that if you're going to create your brand from scratch and you're going to stand alone in a tourism industry, or even any other particular industry, you're going to need to want to put that value proposition forward. Now, one of the other brands that we've done some work with is an internet provider, for example, and they are very different to the rest of the telcos. However, this is where brand comes into play. Is for them to stand out and be different, you would think is quite easy. But whenever we introduce that brand to a new market, they are automatically hated first. Because no one likes telcos. No one likes internet providers because they're all dodgy. They've all got bad service. They all overcharge, under-deliver, all of that sort of thing. It's really hard for us to get that message across first up that we've done everything we can to not be that. So looking at that, that's again where brand comes into play. And we've noticed the big difference opening a new product in Tasmania was really easy because we had the brand backing. Everyone knew who we were, there was already momentum, it was ready to go. Opening it in a new part of the country, much harder because you're starting cold. No one knows who you are, so they're going to lump you in with all the rest of the ones they don't like. So that's another one. It can be good to not join the rest of the brand because a brand can be good or it can be bad. So let's not just automatically think that because everyone knows about something, it's going to be a great thing. So if the rest of the brand is bad, then you have the chance to be good, and you should be able to get cut through pretty quickly. But just remember, you still don't have that natural momentum and step up. No. And the same brand or brands will resonate in different ways with different people. So, for example, if we think about airlines, people will be really, there's some people that are very loyal to Jetstar, for example. Other people are very loyal to Virgin. So, for example, they've got their same brand and they exude it really well. Jetstar says that we're a value-based carrier, and they go with their orange colours. Orange is a colour of being high value and cheap, generally. And because of that, people, really start to build a feeling with them. And it's important when we talk about brand that we remember that not only is it what others are saying, and we do want to get others to say to be advocates for what our brand stands for, but it's about much more than a logical decision. A brand is about winning the mind, but it's also about winning the heart, because if people don't feel comfort or desire for you, they're unlikely to want to do business with you. But also it's about winning the gut feeling. And the gut feeling comes from when all of the things align. They go, yeah, you know what, this does feel right. They're talking about this and I'm seeing that. And they talk about this and seeing that. This brand walks the talk. I can trust it. And whether it's your subconscious or your conscious working, both of those are all working together to determine what you feel in the gut, and that's whether or not you're going to choose one brand or the other. So for me, Jetstar's not my first choice of airline. the next my choice would be Virgin, and I just feel comfortable with that particular brand. I feel comfortable the way it interacts, and I feel comfortable the way they deliver their product and that it suits me. So, and I feel comfortable that they deliver that fairly consistently. So I have a trust in that. However, if I started to feel like that airline valued me less, and there is an example a few years ago where Qantas had a massive outage nationally, and it caused displacement of all of their customers during that time. The customers felt less valued than they normally did, which made them vulnerable. And then Virgin came in and said, we will match all of your status of wherever you are with Qantas. You can have that instantly without having to earn it and just come straight to us at Virgin. And they won a whole heap of business by just dragging them when they were feeling vulnerable. So that's why it's so important to keep the trust up in a brand, because when the trust wavers, then your customers, or you are vulnerable to having your customers won over by someone else. And so this trust thing isn't just something that you build up once. It's not just something that you do in your advertising. It's something that you infuse in everything that you do and keep bringing it over and over and over, because you need to keep the people that trust you wanting you, other than being ready to just start looking around and think, actually, let's give them a try. As soon as you've got your people saying, let's give them a try, you know you need to work on your product a little bit more. Well, it really comes down to not what you sell, but why you're selling it and the value that you're delivering for the consumer at the end of the day. So understanding who your consumer is and who your product delivers the most value to. So what's their pain point? What's the problem that they have in life and how are you going to solve it? For example, Uber. Now, Uber as a product, you know, I think some people question whether they're evil or not, but the thing about Uber, wait a minute, that's not what they want me to be saying about them. The thing about Uber is that they understood the problems that the consumer was having. So they understood that people didn't like getting in a taxi that wasn't clean, that they didn't like calling up for a taxi and not knowing when it was going to arrive, not knowing whether or not you're going to get ripped off at the end of the day, and not knowing what the fare was going to be. And Uber fixed all of that. They just looked at the industry and went, you know, there are negative touch points. If we could just fix those touch points, then all of a sudden we could be ready to go. And that's where trust builds up, because things are more transparent. You get to see what the price is going to be, and it's just consistently easy. So every time you use it, it's the same process, and I've got the same information. I get to review the driver gets to review me. It's all very open, transparent, and consistent. And that's what people want. The only reason people switched away from taxis was because a product delivered to the target consumer better. So from a point of view of what we do with branding, again, I'll come back to the airlines aspect, is all airlines get you from A to B. All airlines use the same security lines. They use mostly the same baggage sort of service to get all your luggage onto the plane, and some of them use different apparatus, but you know, it's the same thing. You and your bag should get to the same destination, but each of the airlines have a different flavour. One of the things I like to make really clear is that awareness is not necessarily a good brand. Just because someone knows about a brand doesn't mean that they're naturally going to desire them or trust them to be able to get them there. I think one of the brands that are recovering in the airline industry from years past is Tiger 1.0 as opposed to Tiger 2.0. Now, Tiger 1.0 was owned by different owners at the start and now is owned by Virgin. And with Virgin Group, they're certainly trying to make it a little more user-friendly and a little bit more cheap and cheerful rather than brutal and unreliable. And that was the brand that 1.0 got around. Now, they made a decision not to change the name and keep the Tiger brand, which means that they now have to keep because that brand wasn't very good, they now have to keep trying to get people to warm to it. So that's a big challenge for them. And I know that in Tasmania, because most people haven't travelled with Tiger 2.0, they probably still hold the same thoughts around that brand. So my point there is that all airlines essentially they all work to the same code, they land at the same airports, a lot of them even use the same ground handlers, so it's all very similar, but they make all of their touch points match the brand that they try to convey. So originally, when it used to be Qantas and then Virgin Blue, and then that's where Jetstar came in to be a budget carrier. So even though Qantas owned both, and now Virgin own Virgin as well as Tiger, one is a more premium carrier and the other one is a budget carrier. And again, they do the same thing, but they do it in different ways. And that's probably the best example I can give on how your brand attributes have to align to everything. And you know, very early in the piece, people that loved Qantas didn't like having to go on a Jetstar flight. Why? Because they expected Qantas touch points all the way along. It was a more premium level of service. They didn't want the Jetstar touch points. So again, if you understand where you sit, if you understand the problem that you're trying to make for the consumer, and it's not just necessarily what the problem is, but is it just inconvenience, you know, or is my consumer time poor? And if they're time poor, make everything as quick and simple as possible. Don't leave them waiting on anything. That could be the worst thing you could do. So understanding what's important to your consumer, understanding that your brand is not going to appeal to everyone, look for your ideal customer, and then create a brand experience from the moment they first meet you, to the moment they're researching you, to the relationship that you're having, to the points of conversion, to the points of sale, to the points of the experience, to helping them share and be advocates for you. All of them should be aligned to the brand that you say you are. The first thing you need to do is understand where the gap lies in the market. Where is their opportunity? Because at the end of the day, a business needs to be able to make money. So that's important. However, you also shouldn't put making money quickly ahead of your brand either. So it's a really fine balance. It's how do we make sure that the brand that we're going to convey has a market that wants both our product and the way we deliver the product, right? So again, coming back to airlines, you know, more than 60% of the flights that come into Launceston are Jetstar. However, it could be said that more than half of Northern Tasmanians might prefer Virgin, yet more of them fly with Jetstar, right? So there's this, there's actually a bit of a combination around preference and understanding what that market gap is critical. Then what level that market is at. So are they a premium buyer? Are they a value buyer? Are they time poor? Are they, you know, they have lots of spare time? Do they have children? Do they not have children? Are they tech savvy? Are they not tech savvy? How are we going to deliver this so that it really fits that market? I think doing that, but then also understanding what the brand attributes are. So if I want to think strategically about how I'm going to get my message across. For example, if you want to get your message across and you want to utilise and leverage off Tourism Tasmania's social media assets, for example. Now, their social media assets are some of the best in the country. In fact, I think they've been put as the best social media assets of any of the states in Australia. Now, that means that they've got massive reach. So if you want your product included in there, then you need to deliver the content in the same brand style as Discover Tasmania want to put on their Instagram grid. If it looks like it's jarring and completely out, it's just not going to land there because they are going to curate a good looking Instagram that has all the right shots in it. You need to be able to find the shots to be able to provide them, to be able to share them. So a lot of the times people say, oh, I don't know why they just don't promote my product. We go, because you don't show your product in the same way that is up to the standard of what they want to have on there. And the reason, it's not because they're being snobby about it, it's because they understand the care that they put in the curation of that Instagram is why they've got so many people. That's why the audience is so strong. So the last thing they're going to do is want to bastardize the product by putting in dodgy shots that look like they're just trying to get a cheap conversion over and a cheap sale, rather than actually uphold the brand. They understand what the brand is. They're going to maintain the integrity of that. So definitely understand who your consumer is. Understand where the product and opportunity lies. Think about how they want that product delivered. Then think about how you're going to reach them. Are you going to reach them through social media channels? Are you going to reach them through airport marketing? How are they going to become aware of you first up? And then how are you going to build rapport? One of the most important ways of being able to build trust is to have third-party referral or the media speak to you. So to have a story that's newsworthy, talk-worthy, ensure that anyone that experiences your organisation and your product are prepared to go up and shout it from the rooftops. If you are an average type of organisation, you're not going to get that. So how are you solving a problem in your industry that no one else has thought to solve? How are you finding those 1%ers that make your product at every touch point better than their competitors? Because when you get that, people feel the comfort and they feel comfortable to be able to say, you know what, I went and had this experience and it was amazing.